Hi everyone, so today I'm going to be redoing my Iron Maiden album ranking. Before I start making new or other music related videos, I really wanted to get this out of the way because I didn't like the way my last ranking turned out. It was like in 3 parts and it was not very well edited, and I hadn't really planned it that well, and there's a lot of peaks and a lot of spots that I feel like I should have been more honest with myself about, and that I feel I'm going to be a bit more honest this time about my true feelings about these albums, in comparison to each other, I mean. And maybe some of you are not going to be fans of this ranking or some of the decisions that I'm gonna make. I also want to recommend a channel called Morbid Sleep if you like to watch discussion videos about metal and metalheads and the culture around it. I really recommend it. I watch all of her videos and they're all really interesting, and she definitely deserves more subscribers, so go check her channel out. Also, a big thank you to Eddie on Ko-fi for his support of my channel. It's really just a coincidence that his name is Eddie, or his username on Ko-fi is Eddie, because this just happens to be the Iron Maiden ranking right now. Just so you know, I do really like all of these albums, but for the purposes of a ranking, some of them I have to be at the bottom, so I have to pick things to complain about, I guess, for each of them. And just because I say negative things about an album doesn't mean that my main view of the album is negative or that I feel mostly negatively about an album. It's just that I have to justify ranking one out of the other. I think the main pick that is not going to make me any friends is number 16, which is Fear of the Dark. I just think it's somewhat of a, maybe I should have it on this side, well, I don't know, but I think it's somewhat of a boring album. It has some good songs, Be Quick or Be Dead, Afraid to Shoot Strangers, and of course I like the title track, and Childhood's End, but most of the songs I think are either kind of bland, or for what they are, for the band that they are, I think they're just kind of mediocre. And some of the songs I would say are some of their worst. Chains of Misery is certainly one of their worst. The Apparition, Weekend Warrior, those are really weak ones, and they're all in this one album. So yeah, I definitely don't think this is their greatest, and I do feel pretty confident saying that this is their worst one. Number 15 is also one that might hurt some people, but believe me, it hurts me more than it hurts you, and it's The Final Frontier. This is just an album that is definitely worth listening to more than a few times in order to really get a sense of what it is. But it's also just kind of tiring to listen to. There's a lot of repetitiveness. I do like Mother of Mercy, Coming Home. I don't really love the last 2 tracks, which I know a lot of people love, When the Wild Wind Blows, but I don't really care for that one. I remember when I started listening to this album for the first time, because I started listening to them around 2009, and this was of course the upcoming album, and I was kind of excited about it, but at the same time, when I actually listened to it, I was a little bit disappointed, and to this day I still haven't felt like this has grown on me. And I think it's only now that I'm able to really admit to myself that I just don't really love this album as much, and it sucks because this is their second most recent one, and it doesn't feel good to know that I just don't like it. But yeah, I just don't care for it that much. I wouldn't really say that I dislike it either. It's just something that, out of other albums, is the one that I really just don't go for. Number 14 is Virtual Eleven, which I don't own, but I don't think it's quite as bad as a lot of people make it out to be. The vocals of Blaze Bayley kind of do work against the music in this album more than in The X Factor, and some of the songs needed a bit more editing down, a bit more work. Some of them I think needed to be a bit longer, even though some of them obviously needed to be much shorter. But some of them should have had more work put into them, like some of them, it feels like they just kind of didn't care as much about the songwriting, like they just didn't care. All of them had potential, but especially I think Lightning Strikes Twice, The Clansman, Educated Fool, and Future Real, those are the ones that I like the most there. But I still feel those ones needed more development. Number 13 is Dance of Death, which I also don't own. It has a fair share of songs that I'm not really that fond of. Gates of Tomorrow, Journeyman, Age of Innocence, I don't really care for those that much. But the best songs are just really, really good and fun. Dance of Death, of course, the title track, Montsegur, Rainmaker, Passchendaele, and Face in the Sand. I think those are some great songs, and I think it's easy to hate this album because of the artwork and because it does have some songs that are not as great. But I think it's a good album, even though it's number 13. I think the best songs on Dance of Death are better than the best ones on Virtual 11, so that makes it be just a bit higher. Number 12 is No Prayer for the Dying. It has some fun moments that I think are missing in the not as great songs in Fear of the Dark. Now, I think, I guess that if you had been alive and listening to them back in the late 80s when they released Seventh Son, and then they come out with this album right after that, I probably would have been very disappointed. But of course, like I mentioned, I started listening to them around 2009, so by the time I started listening to them, I already knew what was the general feeling and the general consensus around this album, and I knew what to expect. I knew that it was a bit more simplistic and that a lot of people didn't like it, and I initially didn't really like it either, but I think I appreciate the simplicity more now than I did before, and I think some of the songs are just really fun. But unfortunately, this album does still have some really just bad tracks. Some of the worst, really, in my opinion, which are Hooks in You and Bring Your Daughter. I used to like Bring Your Daughter a little bit more before, but after the catchiness runs out and it becomes more annoying, you know, I just don't think it's that much of an enjoyable experience to listen to that one. But other than those two, I really like all the songs in this album. Number 11 is their self-titled album, and now don't get me wrong here, I definitely really love and appreciate this album for what it is. And I like some of the songs on it, of course, but some of the songs I think are just not that great. Prowler, I think, is just not a very good song. Charlotte the Harlot isn't either. I think Running Free is a good song, but maybe a bit simple. I guess it was meant to be, you know, a very good live song. But listening to it is just not that interesting. But I do love, the ones that I love from this album, I really, really love. It's just that it has some that I just don't care for. I really love Phantom of the Opera, as a lot of fans do. It's like a fan favorite type of song. Transylvania, Strange World, and I don't really place it in a particularly high spot just because it's their first album, or just because it has their song that is named after the band, or that the band is named after. So yeah, it's only about half of these songs that I really do care to listen to over and over. But you know, it's not a bad album by any means. Number 10 is The Book of Souls, and I do have some issues with this album overall. I think most of the songs are just a bit longer than they really justify, than they really deserve to be. And I hate to say it, but I don't really care that much for Empire of the Clouds. It's very divisive, but I'm definitely one of those people who don't really care that much for it. The first time I listened to this album as a whole, it didn't really click, but I saw them live in this tour, and I realized then how good some of the songs really were. But I do still prefer the first half of this album rather than the second. I feel like maybe it was a better idea to have it as a regular length, album rather than a double CD type of album. Double LP, I don't know what it's called. Next one is Brave New World. I know a lot of people love this album a lot, and for them it's top 5 material, but I just don't care for it that much in comparison to others. I don't really care for the last 2 songs in this album, so I almost never really listen to it front to back. My favorites are the title track, of course, The Wicker Man, Ghost of the Navigator, Dream of Mirrors, The Fallen Angel, but those I tend to listen to their own rather than listening to the actual album as a whole. And also many of the songs have this issue where they're just a bit too repetitive, especially in terms of the hook. I think it also doesn't have that much weight for me because by the time I started listening to them, Bruce and Adrian getting back to the band was really old news at that point. So, it wasn't really that meaningful for me, that album, unlike a lot of people who, they were listening to them back in the late 90s, or they were still keeping tabs on them even if they were disappointed in their last releases, and they were really excited when they both came back. So for me it wasn't all that, because I was like 2 years old when that happened. So yeah, A Matter of Life and Death. When I started listening to them, this was their most recently released album, and I don't really love Different World, which is of course the first track in the album, as much as the rest. And also I think it has some other issues that, even though I think it's a great solid album, if you compare it to the others, it does have this issue where it's very monotone. The songs kind of do blend together and sound a little bit like each other, and aside from the fact that they have very similar topics, but not all of them. I think some of them do a pretty good job of standing out on their own. I really like Brighter Than a Thousand Suns, Lord of Lights, For the Greater Good of God. That one is very good live. You don't even feel how long that actually is when it's live. But I think in comparison to those songs, there's some that just feel a little bit bland. I'm not as big of a fan of Out of the Shadows or The Longest Day, for example, and like I mentioned, I don't love Different World as much. Number 7 is Killers, and I think that I have basically the same issues that I did with Matter of Life and Death, except that I like the songs individually more. They're not very distinct from each other. I feel like most of the album is just made up of songs about wanting to escape, about wanting to be free, needing to get free, and they also tend to sound a lot like each other, so there's not just musical, sonically there's a lot of overlap, but also thematically, like, they have very similar themes. At some degree it feels like you're kind of confusing the songs with each other. They blur together a little bit, but I still think that when you look at the tracks by themselves, they're all really solid, very good songs, but as an album it's a little bit monotone, at least in comparison to some of their other records. Number 6 is The X Factor. Most people either sleep on this album or they just straight up dislike it, but recently I feel like I've seen more appreciation towards this. I have a bias for sort of melancholic or dark or gloomy music overall, and I think that something that helps me like this album more is that I mentioned earlier with No Prayer for the Dying, is that I already knew what to expect from this album. I knew that it sounded really different and that it was a different vocalist, and I knew what to expect. And I think if this wasn't a Maiden album, people would be much more, they would give it more of a chance, because I feel like a lot of people don't really want to listen to the songs very closely, and they just kind of listen to it at a glance, or they listen to the songs once and they go, that's not Bruce, that's not their sound, that's not who they're supposed to be, and that's why they don't like the album. And maybe there are people who just legitimately don't really think these songs are very good or are written well or what have you, but I think they are. Now, this album is pretty limited to one mood in terms of being sad or what have you, but I think that all of the songs are doing something different, and they don't just sound different, but they also are about different things. It's just that they all have this underlying mood that is a bit melancholic. And I think that Bailey's voice, for the most part, is actually very good for what this album is trying to do, except maybe for The Unbeliever, which is probably my least favorite song here. That one and Judgment of Heaven I don't think are their strongest. Bailey's voice in The Unbeliever is kind of struggling a little bit in the chorus, I think it is, but for the most part I think his voice works really well in this album. And also some of the songs here are just absolute classics. Sign of the Cross is great, Lord of the Flies, Man on the Edge, a lot of people like, including me obviously. Look for the Truth is also really good, The Aftermath. I just think there are so many great songs here that are really often overlooked. Number 5 is The Number of the Beast. So this is an album that often gets accused of being overrated, and I think especially by the fans, because they know that there are better songs by them that aren't in this album. But it does deserve a top 5 spot. It's a great album and it does deserve the legendary status that it's gained. The only things that keep me from putting this in any higher spot are the opening track, Invaders. I also don't really care that much for 22 Acacia Avenue, but other than that, pretty solid listen from front to back. I especially love obviously the Closer, Hallowed Be Thy Name, which everyone loves, again, fan favorite. Gangland and Total Eclipse I both really love. I have the CD version where Total Eclipse is there instead of just Gangland, but I do like Gangland a lot, which a lot of people don't. And this just has that energy of like a band that's only starting to get to really find their sound, you know. Number 4 is Peace of Mind, and I still feel like some of the songs there are not that great. Quest for Fire, and I also don't love Sun and Steel as much, but this album has some of their best songs of all time. Flight, of course, Where Eagles Dare, Revelations, The Trooper, obviously, Still Life I also really love. It's kind of underappreciated. But there's something about the second half of this album that just doesn't really do the same thing for me than that the first half does. I don't really care for The Closer that much. Like I said, I don't really care for Quest for Fire, Sun and Steel. So yeah, I think those are kind of weak songs in comparison to the first half of the album. Obviously they're not that weak, because then I wouldn't have it as a number 4. But I just think that that's the one thing that keeps this album from being in the top 3. Now, I think the top 3 are pretty much interchangeable. It kind of depends, I feel, on my mood, or on your mood, I guess, which one is their absolute best. But because I feel like they're all kind of really on the same level, except for me, a couple of songs, I don't know. But my number 3 is Somewhere in Time. Last time I had this at number 2, I think. Maybe I have just listening to it a little bit too often and get used to the sound of it too much, but I love the album. This album, just all the songs are just really, really fun, but at the same time they're not too fun and too lighthearted, you know. Also, look at this beautiful artwork. It's just, I just love it so much. Look at the back of it as well. Just love it. Even Deja Vu, which I feel is really underrated, I think I just really, really love that song. It's very different from the rest, I think. There's not a single one that's like not as great, or, you know, it's just kind of there. But at the same time, I do feel like the ones that I have at the very top are just songs that I just like more individually, or that I listen to more often, or like I mentioned, maybe I haven't listened to that much recently, so maybe I find them a bit more interesting because I've been listening to this one too much. I don't know. Number 2 is Power Slave, and this album is loved for just being made up of absolute bangers, just great ones. Some people might say that it's a little bit overrated, mostly because of the song 2 Minutes to Midnight, which for some people is overrated or overplayed. And of course, Power Slave is one of their most known songs and most loved ones. But I think all of the songs here, even the ones that are not given as much attention, are all really, really great. Flash of the Blade and The Duelists, interestingly, there are 2 songs about the same thing, apparently about fencing, but they both manage to sound and just feel very different in my opinion. Back in the Village is also one that maybe doesn't get as much attention, but it is definitely a song that stands out on its own. And of course the opener is one of their best ones, and it has Rhyme, which is a fan favorite. Everyone loves it, everyone listens to the whole 13-minute thing, and it's just an album where there's not a single moment that is boring, or that is, you know, it doesn't need to be there. Everything here is just really compact. It needs to be there. There's not a moment where it's kind of like repetitive, or it's going on for too long, or anything like that. Number 1 is Seventh Son, and I feel like this album just surprises me more each time, every time I listen to it, because sometimes I think, oh, this song maybe isn't the best of this album. I always want to think about one song here that I don't really care that much for. Maybe it would be kind of Play With Madness, but even then, even every time I listen to it, I am reminded that every song has a part that is really, really interesting musically, you know, an instrumental section that is really good, or maybe a line that I think is really good. And I'm reminded of those really good parts of this album, and that really convinces me that this is really their best one, and that this is like a gift that keeps on giving, you know. You never really get tired of this album. There's always something here that, I don't know, maybe you hadn't noticed before, or something like that. And I just think it's such a great album, one of the best albums, one of my favorite albums in general of all time. So yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and tell me what you think down below. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.